chapter 72. First they have to mark a meridian line, then clear a visto, then measure straight up the middle of it using levels, great wooden rectangles 20 feet long by 4 feet high and an inch thick, mostly of pine boards with iron and brass securing the reinforcing bands, which would have served handsomely in many of these fens as duckboards or rafts, but must instead be carried carefully upright, being compared most dutifully every day with how close to 8 times a 5-foot brass standard might be fit in the length of the 2 levels set end to end, and into the daily corrections needed, the temperature reckoned and entered as well. Each plumb line is protected from the wind by a 3-foot tube. When tilted until the plumb line bisects a certain point drawn at the bottom, the level is level. 'Tis then necessary only to set it with its mate together in a 40-foot line, easily kept true by sighting down its length toward the farthest point of the visto they can see, on the assumption the visto has been truly made. Back in Durham, we style this a squire's line, using the equipment of the gentleman who hires thee. Easy terrain, careful work, turning the telescope over and over, bit of fancy artwork upon the plain table draughts, careful and slow. Slow, 'tis certain. Mason has long dropped all pretence at patience. There are days when the routine has him livid with boredom. As Lady Montague said of Bath, the only thing one can do upon this engagement that one did not do the day before. Bad luck, don't say it, shouts Dixon through his speaking trumpet, though they are close enough not to require any, causing Mason to wince. Never mind when. Shall it end? Set a mark before, set a mark behind, swing the instrument, do it again the other ways. Fucking body and blood, Dixon, I am beside myself. Dixon, approaching a few easy steps, gazes intently 1.5 feet to Mason's right. Why, so yez are. How does that feel, I wonder? Switching his eyes back to Mason, then back to the spot beside Mason. Well, why don't one of thee go ahead and the other behind me? Makes it much easier to line up the marks. Arr! Like a giant eye, ever a stare. He is referring to the target, a board about 1 foot square, with concentric circles drawn on both sides, rigged to be slid in 2 grooves. At the distant gesturing of the man at the telescope, till it should line up precisely upon the central wire, previously brought into the meridian, whereupon the other surveyor hammers in his stake immediately below, drops his plummet string along the centre line of the target, and marks with a notch exactly where, atop the stake, the bob point touches. Then the transit instrument leapfrogs the target and goes ahead of it. Its operator sets up and takes a back sight at the eye upon the board's reverse. Then they do it all again. I find little serious astronomy in any of this, Mason complains. It may be the levelled and selfless pulse of it that enables them, at the end of June, the measurement done, at last to travel south together, across the West Line, into peril however differently construed, leading to Baltimore and the moment when Dixon will accost the slave driver in the street and originate the family story whose material focus for years among the bric-a-brac in Hull will be the driver's lash that Uncle Jeremiah took away from the scoundrel. No proof, declares Ives, no entries for days allowed, but yet no proof. Alas, beams the Reverend, must we place our unqualified faith in the implement as the tale accompanying for its presence? These family stories have been perfected in the hellish forge of domestic recension, generation upon generation, till what survives is the pure truth, annealed to mercilessness about each figure, no matter how stretched, nor how influenced over the years by all sentiments, from unreflective love to inflexible dislike. Don't leave out irresponsible embellishment. Rather, part of the common duty of remembering, surely our sentiments, how we dreamed of and were mistaken in each other, count for at least as much as our poor, cold chronologies. The driver's whip is an evil thing, an expression of ill feeling worse than any between master and slave, the contempt of the monger of perishable goods for his merchandise. In its tattered braiding, darkened to its lash tips with the sweat and blood of drove after drove of human targets, the metal wires worked into each lash, its purpose purely to express hate with, and hate's corollary, to beg for the same denial of mercy, should one day the roles be reversed, gambling that they may not be, or that they may. Dixon has spoken with him already, the night before, in the public room of his inn. The slave driver is announcing a vendue at the dock, 20 Africans, men and women, each a flower of the tribe they had been taken from. Yet he is calling them by names more appropriate to animals one has come to dislike. Several times Dixon feels the need, strong as thirst, to get up, walk over to the fellow and strike him. And so I hope everyone will come down and have a look. Dusky children of the forest, useful in any number of ways. Cook and eat 'em, fuck 'em or throw 'em to the dogs. As we say in the trade, imagine, gents, your very own darky, to order about as you please. You, sir, in the interesting hat, beckoning to Dixon, who raises his brows amiably, at the same time freezing with the certainty that once again he is about to see a face he knows. Someone from the recent past, whose name he cannot remember. A fine young mulatto girl 'ud be just your pint of ale, I'd wager. Well, tonight you're in luck. Damn if you're not. Not in the market, replies Dixon, as he imagines, kindly. Ho! Drawing back in feigned surprise. What's this, not in the market? How then may I even begin to educate you, sir, or should I say, friend, upon this topic? The news, friend, being that all are in the market, however regrettably, for everyone wants a slave, at least one to call his own. Sooner or later, Dixon far too brightly, a slave must kill his master. It is one of the laws of springs. The herdsman of humans who has been staring at Dixon now looks about for a line of withdrawal. Give me engines, for they have no feelings of injustice. Sometimes they don't exist either, so I have to invent what I need. At which point the enterpriser has edged his way as far as the door. Remember tomorrow, midday at the pier. And he is off like a shot. Attention shifts to Dixon, whose insane demeanour has vanished with the dealer's departure. Will you be there, sir? Inquires a neighbouring drinker, more sociably teasing than wishing to sting. Being one of our sights down here, of interest to a visitor, you might find it diverting. Not quite as much as a horse auction, of course. Dixon vibrated his eyeballs for a while. That's it. Slaves and horses. Why, and tobacco. You've never seen a tobacco auction. Say, you'll never listen to an Italian tenor the same way again. In 55, at the grim news of Braddock's fate, Pennsylvanians had come flying eastward before the Indians, over Susquehanna in a panic. Here in the Chesapeake slave country, rather stretched long nights of apprehension, the counting of kitchen knives, fears concealed, fears detected, fears betrayed, of poisons in the food, stranglings at midnight, women violated, horses and cash, house and home gone, as their spoliators into the boundless continent, and everywhere the soft weight of the nocturnal breath above that water-riddled country. In his heart, Mason has grown accustomed to the impossibility between Dixon and himself of affection beyond a certain enclosure. They have spent years together inside one drawn perimeter and another. They also know how it is out in the forest, over the coastal ranges, out of metropolitan control. Only now, far too late, does Mason develop a passion for his coadjutor, comparable to that occurring between public school students in England. Oh, please, Wicks, spare us. Far too romantic, really, mutter several voices at once. Say, then, that Mason at last came to admire Dixon for his bravery, a different sort than they had shown each other years before on the Seahorse, where they'd had no choice, nor quite the same as they'd both exhibited by the warrior path. Here, in Maryland, they had a choice at last, and Dixon chose to act, and Mason not to, unless he had to. What each of us wishes he might have the unthinking grace to do, yet fails to do. To act for all those who have so failed. For the sheep. Yet Mason offered his admiration, so long and unreasonably withheld, only to provide Dixon fodder for more rustic jokery. "All! Pray thee, Mason, shall I have a special uniform for that? Something with a cloak to it, mantua length, would be better, wouldn't it, than all the way down, for I would need access to my pistol." There, unavoidable in the street, is the slave driver. And he's driving about half his drove, who through some inconvenient behaviour remain unsold. He is screaming, having abandoned all control, and striking everywhere with the whip, mostly encountering the air, even with the movements of the Africans limited by the chains, having failed to inflict much injury. "You fucked up my sale, you fucked up my day, you fucked up my business. Now I owe money, plus another night's lodging, plus another night's victualling." "I'll just seek assistance then, shall I?" Mason making as if to flee. "Mason, thou the only one nearby who knows how to watch my back. Would thou mind frightfully?" And before Mason can stir, Dixon is down the steps and into the street. "That's enough." He stands between the whip and the slaves, with his hat back and his hand out. Later he won't remember how. "I'll have that." "You'll have it to your head, friend, if you don't step out of my way. These are mine. I'll do as I damn please with my property." Townsfolk pause to observe. Dixon, moving directly, seizes the whip. The owner comes after it. Dixon places his fist in the way of the oncoming face. The driver cries out and stumbles away. Dixon follows, raising the whip. "Turn around. I'll guess you've never felt this." "You broke my tooth." "In a short while, that's not going to matter much, because in addition, I am going to kill you. Now be a man. Face me and make it easier, or must I work upon you from the back, like a beast, which will take longer and certainly mean more discomfort for you?" "No, please, my little ones. Oh, Tiffany, Jason." "Any more?" "Soames." Dixon reaches down and tears from the man's belt a ring of keys. "Who knows where these go?" "We know them by heart, sir," replies one tall woman in a brightly striped headcloth. With the driver protesting the usefulness of his life, the Africans unchain themselves. "Now then," cries Dixon merrily, a not at all friendly crowd by now having formed. And as we're in the middle of town here," the Africans advise him, "sheriff's men'll be here any moment. Don't worry about us. Some will stay, some will get away, but you'd better go right now." Despite this sound counsel, Dixon still greatly desires to kill the driver, cringing there among the wagon ruts. What's a man of conscience to do? It is frustrating. His voice breaks. "If I see you again, you are a dead man." He shakes the whip at him. "And dead you'll be, ere you see again this instrument of shame. For it will lie in a Quaker home, and never more be used. Don't bet the meeting house on it, snarls the driver, scuttling away. Go back to Philadelphia, someone shouts at Dixon. Good withdrawal line or two here yet, reports Mason. Thrusting the whip into his red coat, Dixon steps away, Mason following. At the first brick prow of a house to block them from view, they take to their heels, returning by a roundabout and not altogether witting route to the stable where their horses wait. Rebel old girl, I'm pleased to see your face. Dixon has brought a small apple from a fruitmonger's barrow, but the horse dives anyway beneath the giant flaps of his coat pockets and goes in to inspect lest something should have been overlooked. At that moment of equine curiosity, with Mason occupied and saddling up, Dixon understands what Christopher Mayer must have meant long ago by instrument of God, and his obligation, henceforth, to keep silence upon the topic. They are very conscious of leaving town. With luck, for the last time, observing everything as through some marvellous specs that make all come sharp and near. Sailors sit upon curbstones outside the front doors of the taverns that have intoxicated them, vomiting the surveyors on with a strange elation. Traffic in the street brings and takes its own light, lanthorns upon carriages projecting in swooping shadows over upon the crooked meridians and parallels of the brick walls. Every leafless tree, every desire-driven pedestrian and street-weary dog, in low-ceilinged rooms at right angles to the street, wagon drivers stand in glum rows, drinking as if out of duty, protected from the snow that promises at any moment to begin, though from little else, least of all the road and its chances. Women pull their shawls in against the night. Young people, singly and paired, bound for twilight assignations, sweep up and down the steps of row houses, and along the curbsides from which the steps rise, in all the traceless promise of first lantern light. Now that the surveyors must leave, they wish to stay. In an onset of turning evil, Mason imagines the streets full of row houses, multiplying like loaves and fishes, whirling past like spokes of a giant wheel, whose convergence or hub, beyond some disputable prelude to radiance, he cannot make out. They are soon enough upon the York Road, the deeply magnetized fields to either side, in the dark, tugging at bits, buckles, pen nibs, compass needles, and the steel strands of the driver's whip. They feel covered with small beings, crawling and plucking everywhere, neither kindly remembrances nor wicked spirits. Do you feel that? Calls Mason in the dark. You're the needle master. What is it? Mysteries of the magnetic? After a bit. Aye, instances of those being... I don't know, Mason. 'Tis why I say mysteries. Lanthorn lights ahead. Soon they can hear a night congregation singing. Reaching a small wood moon-coloured chapel, as if by earlier arrangement, the surveyors pause to listen. O God, in thy mercy, forever uncertain, upon whom continue thy sheep to rely. Pray keep us till dawn, be the night e'er so long. All thy helpless creation, who sleep 'neath the sky. For the chances of night are too many to reckon, and the bridge to the daylight is ever too frail. When the hour of departure shall strike to the second, who will tend to the journey? Who will find us the trail? As once were we lambs in a springtide abiding, as once were we children eternal and free, so shepherd us through where the dangers be few. From darkness preserve us, returning to thee. For the chances of night. Having acknowledged at the warpath the justice of the Indians' desires, after the 2 deaths, Mason and Dixon understand as well that the line is exactly what Captain Zhang and a number of others have been styling it all along, a conduit for evil. So the year in Delaware with the degree of latitude is an atonement, an immersion in real science, a baptism of the cypress swamp, and even a rebirth, not some hired cadastral survey by its nature corrupt, of use at trail's end only to those who would profit from the sale and division and resale of lands. Guineas, Mason, pistoles, and Spanish dollars, splendorously vomited from Pluto's own gut, without end, all generated from that one line. Yet has any of it so much as splashed or dribbled in our direction? The one thing we do know is how to do. The one thing we do know how to do is vistos. Let's give 'em something they'll journey from other provinces down rivers and pikes and streams ever widening to gaze upon. As the visto soon is lined with inns and shops, stables, games of skill, theatricals, pleasure gardens, a promenade, nay, mall, 80 miles long. At twilight you could mount to a platform and watch the lamps coming on, watch the visto tapering in perfect projection to its ever unreachable point, pure latitude and longitude. I am a student. I am a student of Blind Jack Metcalf, if it please you, declares one of the axemen, overhearing them. West Riding lad, blind surveyor. He was famous in Staindrop even when I was a lad. That was Mason. Applying the methods I learned whilst a member of his crew, we could build a modern road here, straight up this Visto, the 80 miles well drained, its entire length, self-compacting, impervious to all weather, immovable, neath laden wheels, be they broad or narrow. True, there's nothing much at the middle point, not today as we speak, but with the much improved carriage from the other end, itself convenient to Philadelphia, Newcastle, the entire heart of Chesapeake. Why, a metropolis could blossom here among the fens of Nanticoke that might rival any to the north. Pshaw, warns the Chinaman. Think about it. Very well, yet right lines by minimizing distance are highly valued by some. Commanding officers, merchants, express riders, must these all be creatures of Shah? Without question. Officers kill men in large numbers. Merchants concentrate wealth by beggaring uncounted others. Express riders distort and injure the very stuff of time. Then why not consider light itself as equally noxious, inquires Dixon, for doth it not move ever straight ahead? Ah! A gleam is likely madness as merriment appearing in his eye, and if it moves in some other way. Every survey would have to be rerun, cries Dixon. Marvellous! Work for all the poor dodmen till doomsday. Excuse me, sir. Mason addresses the geomancer. Is this an article of common faith among the Chinese, which I must remedy my ignorance of, or but a crotchet of your own, I assume I may safely disregard. No wonder the Jesuits find you folk inconvenient. What's that you're writing? Looks like verse. My epitaph. Like to hear it? He wished but for a middling life, forever in betwixt the claims of lust and duty, so intricately mixed, to reach some happy medium, fleet as a golden beam, uncharted as St. Brendan's Isle, fugitive as a dream. Alas, 'twas not so much the years, as day by thieving day, with debts incurred and interest due, that dreams were sold to pay, until at last but one remained, too modest to have worth, that yet he holds within his heart, as he is held in earth. That other tract, across the border, perhaps nearly everything, perhaps nearly nothing is denied him. Is that why I sought so obsessedly death's insignia, its gestures and formulae, its quotidian gossip, all those awful days out at Tyburn, hours spent nearly immobile, watching stone carvers labour upon tomb embellishments, chip by chip? Was it all but some way to show my worthiness, to obtain a permit, to visit her, to cross that grimly patrolled line, that very essence of division? She only wishes me back in the stink of mills, mutton grease, hell clamour, lanterns all night, the people in subjection, the fouled wells of Painswick, Bisley, Stroud, styling it home. Oh, is there no deliverance? She accosts him one night, walking the Visto. Seems sad, doesn't it? She chuckles. Trust me, Mopery, there are regions of sadness you have not seen. Nonetheless, you must come back to our vale, round to your beginning, well away from the sea and the sailors, away from the nets of imaginary lines. You must leave Mr. Dixon to his fate and attend your own. You don't care for him, do you? If we are a triangle, then must I figure as the unknown side. Dare you calculate me? Dead reckon your course into the wilderness that is now my home, as my exile? Show by projection shapes beyond the meagre prism of my grave? Do you have any idea of my sentiments? I think not. Mr. Dixon would much prefer you forget me. He is of beaming and cherry temperament, a boy who would ever be off to play. You were his playmate. Now that is over, and you must go back inside the house of your duty. When you come out again, he will no longer be there, and the dark will be falling. On their last visit to New York, at the very end, waiting for the Halifax packet, they dash all about the town, looking for any face familiar from years before. Yet they are berated for their slowness at corners. Carriages careen through puddles the size of ponds, spattering them with mire unspeakable, so that they soon resemble irregulars detached from a campaign in some moist country. The Sons of Liberty have grown even less hospitable, and there is no sign of Philip Dimdown, nor Blackie, nor Captain Volcano. Out of town, they are told, when they are told anything. Let's drink up and get out of here. There's no point. We can find them. That's what we do, isn't it? We're finders after all. The continent is casting off, one by one, the lines that fastened us to her. Yet, at last, seated among their impedimenta, cage unreckoned stretching north and south into wood lattice work, a deep great thicket of spars, poised upon the sky, hemp and city smoke, two of a shed full of sombrely cloaked travellers waiting the tide. They are aware once more of a feeling part intracranial, part skin quiver, part fear, familiar from inns at bridges, waiting places at ferries. All lenses of revenance or haunting, where have ever converged to them images of those they drank with, saw at the edges of rooms from the corners of eyes, shouted to up or down a visto. This seems to be true now of every face in this place. Mason turns, his observing eye protruding in alarm. Are we at the right pier? I was just about to ask. I didn't actually see any signs, did you? They are approached by a gentleman not quite familiar to them. A slouch hat obscures much of his face. Well met, he pronounces, yet nothing further. Are ye bound for Falmouth? Mason inquires. For Pendennis Point, mean ye, and Carrick Roads. His tone poises upon a cusp twixt mockery and teasing. which recognition might modulate to one or the other, yet neither can quite identify him. That Falmouth. There is another, sir. Dixon, mania tropic, detectors a jangle, gets to his feet as Mason eyeballs the exits. There is a Falmouth invisible, as the centre of a circle is invisible, yet with compasses and straight edge may be found, the stranger replies. At that instant the company is roused by a great clamour of bells and stevedores as the packet, rigging a throb, prepares to sail. There will be perhaps 2 minutes to get aboard. We must continue this conversation at sea, and he has vanished in the commotion. Each day on the way over, Mason and Dixon will look for him at mess, at cards, upon every deck, yet without issue. Mason's last entry for September 11th, 1768, reads, At 11 hours 30 minutes a.m., went on board the Halifax packet boat for Falmouth. Thus ends my restless progress in America, followed by a point and a long dash that thickens and thins again, Chinese style. Dixon has been reading over his shoulder. What was mine then? Restful? End of chapter.